Undercover boss orders a burger at his diner, stops cold when he hears two employees whisper they hate this place. That morning, the sky was crystal clear, like a mirror reflecting the silent worries Michael Carter had kept hidden in his heart for months. At 50 years old, Michael was no longer the young man who once started from nothing, launching his business with a tiny roadside diner. From those early days spent sweating in a cramped kitchen, personally serving every plate of food, he had come to deeply understand the value of kindness, both toward his customers and the hardworking people behind the counter. It was from that simple philosophy that Michael built his culinary empire known as Sunrise Dinera Place, where every meal didn't just fill the stomach but also warm the heart, a place where every employee was cherished like a member of a great family. But as the empire grew and luxury office towers gradually replaced the humble little diner, Michael was forced to hand over operations to the senior management team. He himself retreated into the background, seated comfortably in a leather chair on a high-rise office floor, receiving daily reports filled with perfect numbers and constant reassurances that everything is fine. Yet, his heart felt unsettled. Complaints began to surface everywhere from cold, cutting reviews on social media to brief hallway conversations. The staff there don't even smile anymore. The food's gone cold, and the service feels even colder. Part of him wanted to believe in those stable reports, but another part deeper and more honest pushed Michael to see the truth with his own eyes, to listen not just with his ears but with his heart. And so, on a quiet early morning, Michael put on an old coat, pulled a faded cap low over his head, and left behind all the glitz and glory of the CEO's office. No assistants, no private driver, no gleaming name badge. Just him with a false name and one unwavering purpose. I must find out exactly what has become of the place once called the Heart of Sunrise. The faint clatter from the kitchen echoed softly, blending with the low hum of the toasters. Michael sat quietly in a corner of the diner where the warm yellow lights shone just brightly enough to see, but dim enough to remain unnoticed. In front of him, a burger had just been served. The golden bun looked perfect on the outside, but as he picked it up, it felt cold and stiff. The patty inside was overcooked, the cheese no longer melting seductively like it once did, the very recipe Michael had personally created all those years ago. He closed his eyes, took a bite, and at that exact moment, a voice quietly rose from behind the kitchen, counter soft enough to be swallowed by the surrounding noise. Yet to Michael, it echoed like a thunderous bell. I hate this place. Every day feels like hell, and I don't even have the courage to quit. He froze. A chilling sensation crept down his spine. The burger in his hand suddenly felt unbearably heavy. A bitter taste flooded his mouth, leaving no trace of the pride it once held. This was the very dish he had proudly introduced to the world, once the symbol of days filled with smiles and excitement. And yet today, as that same burger sat in his hand right here, in the very heart of his life's work, it had become a cruel reminder of the values he was slowly losing. Michael clenched the napkin in his hand, each breath becoming tighter and heavier. He realized that all the beautiful numbers and flawless financial reports could never reflect the oppressive atmosphere now suffocating this place. And in that moment, he knew, if he didn't face the truth now, Sunrise Diner would become nothing more than a hollow name framed on a wall, rather than living on in the hearts of those who once believed in it. In the days that followed, Michael didn't return to his office. There were no grand meetings, no clinking of coffee cups on marble tables. Instead, he quietly went back to where it all began, Sunrise Diner. But this time, he didn't come as the founder. He returned as an anonymous guest, silently observing, recording, and tasting every ounce of the pain that now lingered within these walls. Early morning. Before the sunlight could pierce through the dusty windows, Michael was already there. The staff dragged their heavy feet across the floor, and where there were once warm greetings for customers, now only faint, swallowed sighs remained. Afternoon. The diner was packed, but the air was void of life. Behind the counter, Manager Gary stood unfazed, his voice cold and mechanical like a human cash register. Water down the burger sauce, cut the cheese portion in half. Anyone who dares complain, tell them to look at the internal fund and learn to be frugal. Tips, collect them all, no questions. Michael listened, and he felt the blood in his veins turn cold. Those perfect numbers from the reports now flashed through his mind like a cruel joke, crafted from greed and indifference. His signature dish, the pride of his career, had lost its soul. The burger was dry, the bun so cold it numbed his hands, and the meat patty was sliced so thin it was almost transparent. The sauce was watered down, running across the plate like the empty promises etched in those polished financial reports. From another corner, complaints began to rise like warning bells. Far too late. Sunrise feels so different now. Back then, coming here warmed the heart. Now it just leaves you frustrated. Michael sat in silence, listening to every sigh, as though he could hear the very sound of his heart breaking. And then came the moment that left him truly speechless. Late afternoon. As the last rays of sunlight quietly faded beyond the stained windows, Michael caught sight of a young waitress, her hair tied hastily, the apron around her waist worn and faded. She sat curled up in a corner of the small kitchen, her hands trembling as she hurriedly tore at a piece of hard, dry bread or meager meal after a long, exhausting day. Her eyes were fixed on the overdue rent notice in front of her, the harsh red numbers printed so boldly it felt as if they could rip right through the heart of anyone who saw them. The dim screen of her battered phone lit up with a cold, merciless message. Power cut warning, effective tomorrow. And then, as if already too familiar with hiding her sorrows, she stood up, adjusted her faded apron, and bowed her head with a tired, mechanical smile greeting customers, out of sheer habit. Michael stood frozen behind the door, his eyes burning. It was him, the very man who once promised to bring happiness to everyone here, who had allowed it all to fall into such despair. In that moment, Michael Carter felt it more deeply than ever before. The beautiful reports he had once signed off on were nothing more than curtains hiding a brutal reality. Sunrise Diner hadn't lost its soul because of a lack of customers, but because those who remained could no longer find joy in staying. And right then, under the fading twilight, Michael silently made himself a promise zone that needed no witness, but would forever echo in his heart. I've let this place fall into darkness for far too long, but from this very moment, I will reignite that flame with my own hands. That night was a night without rest. Michael returned to his penthouse atop the Sunrise headquarters building, but his mind was still trapped beneath the dim lights of the old diner. The creak of chairs, the scent of stale bread, and that exhausted smile from the young girl played over and over in his head like a film on endless repeat, without an ending. He stood before the large glass window, the city glowing brilliantly at his feet, but no matter where he looked, all he could see was darkness, almost midnight. Unable to bear it any longer, Michael threw on his old coat, the same one he wore in the early days of his startup, and headed back alone to Sunrise Diner. This time, there was no cheerful chatter of staff, no familiar clatter of plates and utensils. The entire diner was silent, broken only by the faint creak of the ceiling fan in the gloomy space. At the bar, a nightlight was still on. A chipped ceramic cup sat there, still carrying the faint scent of old coffee, the kind of coffee he once cherished down to each and every bean. Michael slowly walked toward the corner of the diner, where old photographs still hung capturing the moment he first opened Sunrise Diner, a photo of him and his very first staff, their faces beaming with hope. He gently reached out, touching the old photograph, his heart heavy. At that very moment, Michael pulled out his phone and called HR directly. Even though it was the middle of the night, his voice was firm and decisive. Draft an immediate order summoning all senior management. 8 a.m. tomorrow. At Sunrise Diner, we're going to have the conversation I should have called for a long time ago. As he ended the call, Michael sat quietly in a chair, his eyes gazing distantly out the small diner's window. The night felt colder, but within his heart, a fire had begun to rise, small, but warm and unwavering. The next morning, in 7:45 a.m., the doors of Sunrise Diner swung open. The senior management team, men and women, always dressed in perfectly tailored suits and armed with polished reports, stepped into the very place they had long forgotten. They froze when they saw Michael Carter standing there. Not the powerful CEO they were used to seeing at conferences and financial news panels, but a man in a simple old coat, standing in the middle of the diner, his gaze steady, meeting each of them directly. A cup of coffee was placed on the table this time, real coffee, rich and piping hot. Michael smiled softly and turned to those gathered. Do you remember this taste? This is Sunrise, not those soulless numbers on your reports. The hall fell silent. That day, the dawn didn't just shine through the window sill, truly lit up the hearts of everyone standing quietly inside. And that was the beginning of a new era for Sunrise Diner. An era that Michael promised himself, no matter how much it would cost, he would reignite with all his heart. No one else but me must bring the light back to this place, so that warm smiles will once again fill every corner. The next morning, Sunrise Diner, main hall. The atmosphere inside the diner was thick with tension, as if the entire space was holding its breath before a looming storm. Rumors of an unprecedented emergency meeting had spread through every corner. The staff stood quietly in line, exchanging anxious glances. No one dared to guess what would happen. Exactly at 9 a.m., the glass doors swung open. Michael Carter walked in. Gone was the old coat, Gone was the quiet, disguised figure from days past. Today, he appeared in a sharp gray suit, a gleaming name badge pinned proudly to his chest. Michael Carter, CEO, founder, Sunrise Restaurant Group. The entire room fell completely silent. Garethi branch manager stood frozen behind the counter, sweat beading on his forehead. And the young waitress, the very one who had left such a deep impression on Michael these past few days, stood there too, clutching the hem of her apron, her eyes filled with a flickering mix of fear and hope. Michael stepped forward, his voice deep and clear, each word cutting through the heavy silence like a sharp blade. I once said that Sunrise Diner wasn't just a place to serve breakfast. It was born from a dream, a place where every person, whether customer or employee, would feel warmth and respect. But I have let this place lose its way for far too long. He motioned toward the technical team. The large screen lit up, and raw, chilling footage filled the entire room. The evidence played out openly for all to see. Footage of Gary casually accepting a thick envelope from a supplier, his expression cold and emotionless. Images of cheap, low-quality ingredients being wheeled into the stockroom. And then, a recording played loud and clear. Cut back on the coffee grounds. Don't waste the cheese. Tips? Put them in the internal fund. If anyone doesn't like it, they can quit. No one dared to even breathe loudly. Michael turned, his gaze sharp as a blade pointed directly at Gary. Gary, do you have anything to say before I sign the dismissal order right here and now? Gary tried to stammer, but every word was stuck in his throat. Sweat poured down his temples. Michael didn't hesitate another second. He pulled out his fountain pen and signed the dismissal papers decisively. Cost saving has never been an excuse to sell out human dignity. From this moment on, you are officially dismissed. And for anyone who aided this, you have a choice. Walk out that door, or stay here and rebuild this place with me with respect, kindness, and integrity. A touching moment where the dawn breaks. Michael stepped down and walked directly toward the young waitress. In the hushed hall, his voice softened, as though he were asking his own heart, "Why didn't you leave this place sooner?" The girl gave a faint, bittersweet smile, but in her eyes was an entire sky of hope. Because I still believed that one day this place would feel warm again, like a family breakfast everyone once dreamed of. The air seemed to freeze in that moment. Michael gently took her hand and pulled a bank card from his pocket. There's $50,000 on this card. This isn't a gift, it's an apology. And more than that, it's an investment in the resilience and kindness you held on to, even through the darkest days. He turned toward everyone in the room. Asterisk. From this moment forward, I am announcing a complete reform program, Sunrise Reborn, and Sheh, one who never lost faith in this place, will be the very first to join the executive management training program. And one day soon, she will stand here as an inspiration to all of you. The sound of applause rose, not just a celebration, but the beginning of a true new dawn, right under the familiar roof of Sunrise Diner. Michael looked directly into the eyes watching him. For the first time in years, the main hall of Sunrise Diner was filled with a very different kind of light, not the harsh glare of electric bulbs, but the soft glow of hope, rekindled in hearts that had almost gone cold. Michael took a step forward, his voice warm but firm. Asterisk. And I'm not standing here just to make promises, I'm standing here to act. Starting today, base salaries for all employees will be adjusted to ensure a life of dignity. All tip money will be publicly disclosed and transparently distributed, going to those who deserve it. Not into some shadowy internal fund anymore. Asterisk. He glanced down at the card in the young waitress's hand, then continued. We will rebuild Sunrise starting from the smallest acts of kindness. A cup of coffee that's as rich and flavorful as it once was. A loaf of bread made with heartfelt care. And above all, a genuine smile from people who are truly happy. The murmurs gradually faded. Suddenly, from the back of the hall, a hesitant round of applause broke out, then slowly swelled like waves crashing onto the shore. Michael's eyes swept slowly across the room. He saw the very faces that had long looked only at the ground now lifted, their eyes sparkling with pride. In that moment, he knew the journey to bring Sunrise Diner back had truly begun. Michael returned to the center, where the young waitress stood, still overwhelmed, her eyes glistening with tears of happiness not yet dry. He nodded gently and motioned for her to step up to the podium. I want everyone to understand, this is not charity. This is recognition. She deserves to be here. She deserves to become part of the new management team, the people who will restore the soul of Sunrise. The girl stepped onto the stage amid a roaring applause. Her eyes no longer carried the fatigue of the past days, but shone with newfound confidence and strength. Standing before hundreds of people, she bowed slightly and spoke in a trembling but determined voice. I once thought hope was something too far out of reach, but today, each of you, and especially Mr. Michael Carter, have shown me hope was never truly gone. It was only waiting for us to light it up again. On the rooftop, Michael stood quietly behind the large glass window. From there, he could see the entire sunrise dinner at the main hall, bustling with customers, the sound of cheerful conversations blending with the warm aroma of freshly baked bread. And somewhere in the soft morning breeze, the rich scent of coffee lingered like a symphony of those very first days. He smiled gently, his eyes slowly closing, listening to his heart beat peacefully for the first time in years. This is the dawn I once dreamed of. That morning, Sunrise Diner, the grand opening of Sunrise Reborn. The atmosphere in the diner was brighter than even the morning sun. But this light didn't come from dazzling LED lights or a brand new signboard. It came from genuine smiles, eyes sparkling with belief, and laughter ringing throughout the space sounds that had been lost here for far too long. Right at the main hall, beneath a large banner reading Sunrise Reborn, stood the young woman who had once quietly sat in the corner, hurriedly eating dry bread during the darkest days. Now, she stood tall on the stage in a crisp new uniform. On her chest, a gleaming name tag reflected the lights. Emily Collins, Assistant General Manager. Emily took a deep breath, her eyes sweeping across the hall where new faces waited nervously. She spoke not with the timid voice of the past, but with a tone filled with strength and pride. I once thought I could only bow my head and endure, believing this place would never again be a safe haven for people like me. But today, standing here, I want you all to know, as long as one person dares to hope, the light will always have a chance to return. And now, each of you will be the ones to bring back the dawn for Sunrise Diner. Applause broke out like a summer rain after a long drought. All eyes turned to Emily, the most vivid symbol of this revival journey. Up on the rooftop, through the large glass windows, Michael Carter stood in quiet reflection. Arms crossed, his eyes watched the lively scene below the main hall, bustling with customers, the sound of cheerful conversation mingling with the warm aroma of freshly baked pancakes. And somewhere in the fresh morning breeze, the rich scent of coffee swirled like a familiar song from those very first days. He gently closed his eyes, a soft smile curling at his lips. When he opened them again, the morning sunlight streamed through the windows, gently illuminating every line on his experienced face, the face of a man who had devoted his life to a dream that once seemed all but lost. Michael whispered, his voice full of contentment, This is the dawn I once dreamed of. Asterisk, you may build a grand empire, but if you forget the value of humanity, all of it becomes nothing more than a castle built on sand. A sustainable business isn't built from cold numbers, it's built from hearts that have been warmed, dreams that have been reignited, and lives that have found happiness because of you. For in the end, the greatest legacy you can leave behind is not a vast fortune, but the lives you have touched through kindness and compassion. Asterisk, the soft morning sunlight streamed through freshly polished glass windows, gliding over the newly buffed wooden floors, filling the space with the warm scent of wood. Unlike the heavy mornings of the past, Sunrise Diner now wore an entirely new aura, pure and full of life, yet comfortingly familiar. From as early as 5:30 a.m., the kitchen had been bustling. The sound of sizzling pans echoed, and the rich aroma of pancakes blended perfectly with the deep scent of freshly brewed coffee, filling the air and causing every early guest to pause at the entrance, taking a deep breath as if they wished to hold on to that moment forever. Emily, now the assistant general manager, didn't stay on the grand stage. She personally tied her apron and worked alongside the new staff at the coffee counter. She greeted every customer with a radiant smile, her eyes shining openly with pride. Welcome to the new dawn of Sunrise Diner. Please enjoy your first coffee of the day today. It's free for every smile we see. Joyful voices filled the air. Old customers, new faces, the elderly, and children alike lingered a little longer, savoring not only the coffee but also the kindness and warmth that this place had once lost. In one corner of the diner, Michael stood quietly, holding a classic white porcelain coffee cup, the very same type he'd chosen for Sunrise Diner's first grand opening years ago. The rich aroma of coffee stirred old memories, awakening a time filled with ambition and hope. He smiled gently as he watched the children receive sun-shaped cookies, a new symbol for the warm breakfast initiative Sunrise Diner had just launched. Elderly guests were served hot tea for free, and every employee bowed graciously as each customer stepped through the doors. The chime of the little bell at the entrance rang clearly, not just marking the comings and goings of guests, but sounding like a cheerful melody welcoming every new ray of sunlight. And when the true dawn flooded the space, Michael lifted his head and gazed at the new golden logo shining brightly above. Sunrise Diner, every day is a beautiful new beginning. Yeah, in that moment, he knew. It wasn't just a new day, it was the start of a brand new era. This dawn will never fade again. Michael whispered to himself, his heart overflowing with hope, just like the warm sunlight now filling every corner of this beloved